Let's take a trip. Let's do it.
Hey everyone, this is David, and I'm here today to bring you guys a new segment we're going to start. I think we're going to call it Korean Storytime with David. Yeah, I just came up with that. But basically, it's pretty much what it sounds like. As most of you guys know, I've been back in the US for 6 months now, and I spend a lot of my time just telling people stories about what I did in Korea and all the amazing stuff that happened to me out there. And probably most people hate it because that's all I talk about. But some of you guys out there might be more interested in this than the people that surround me down here in Texas, who probably could care less and, walk away shaking their heads at me. But I think this stuff's pretty interesting, and I think there's maybe a certain niche audience out there, or people who are going to be going to Korea or into Korean culture who also, might like this stuff. So basically, I'm just going to tell you guys some stories of some of the cool stuff that happened in Korea. Alright, so our first story time is going to be one of my favorite ones, and this one's titled My First Korean Friend. So I moved to Korea and didn't really know many people out there. This is probably a situation most people will be in. There's about 6 other foreigners, non-Koreans, living in my little area. My area was called Tapdong, and that was a small district of Suwon, which is a big city. But yeah, in my little neighborhood, not many foreigners, so there's mostly Koreans there, and I didn't really live in like that rich or nice of an area, so a lot of the Koreans there didn't really speak the best English. Usually the higher wealth an area has, and the more rich an area has, the better English is. So more in Seoul, you'll get more English. Or later, I lived in an area called Bundang, which is quite wealthy, and everyone there could speak English. They had experience abroad. Well, not everyone, but most people. So anyway, the Suwon's a little bit more of an industrial area, not a lot of English going on. So I really wanted to make Korean friends. That's why I went to Korea, to experience Korea. And luckily, it didn't take long at all. So I was going into Seoul to meet some of my friends from my university, actually. And I was really, really weird. This is my first week in Korea, and I've never used a public bus in my life. I took the yellow school bus to school when I was a kid, but I'd never taken a public bus before, and I was really confused about which side of the road to take it on. One side will take you one way, the other side obviously takes you the opposite way, and I didn't want to catch it on the wrong side and be lost in another country, not speaking the language. It sounded like a nightmare, so I knew that was out of the question. I wanted someone new to show me the way, one of the other foreigners in my town perhaps. But what I did was I would just walk to the subway station. So it could have been a 5-minute bus ride, which I later did, or it could have been like a 2-minute taxi ride, a 3-minute taxi ride. But I don't know. I was told, I read online all this stuff. Don't trust taxi drivers. They're bad. They'll take you way out of the way. So I would just walk, and what could have been, actually it's probably more like a 5-minute taxi ride, 15-minute bus ride, and that was more like a 40-minute walk. So I would just walk it, and to be safe, I did this for like my first maybe month, maybe even 2 months in Korea. I would just walk. Everyone thought I was weird and crazy, and I was, but it was my first time leaving the US, so yeah, I was scared. So yeah, I would just walk to the subway station. So I walked there, had a full day out in Seoul. I think I went to Hongdae, and on my way back, take the subway back from Seoul. It took about an hour and a half maybe by subway. So I think I'd been out all day, really, really tired. The subway was packed on the way back, nowhere to sit, so I had to stand the whole way. And about halfway through that, I transferred. So on this next, second leg of the trip, I had about 40 minutes, and I kept noticing this guy next to me, kind of like looking over, staring at me a lot, looking me up and down, all crazy. I don't know. It's kind of creeping me out. He's looking at me too much. Usually in Korea, people really stay in their box and they don't really make a lot of eye contact with people, stare at people. But yeah, this guy was obviously like looking at me, and I don't know. I heard you're a foreigner, you stand out, so I thought maybe I'm just a foreigner. That's why he was looking at me. And then finally, like, I made eye contact with him a little bit, and he just did this thing, which would end up being like the classic thing that everyone's had this conversation a million times, has been in Korea, which is, what's your name? And I said, oh, hi, my name's David, and asked where are you from, what do you do, ran through all your typical questions, and I asked him what's his name, and he said his name is, hi, my name is Bread, and oh, Brad, that's a good name, like Brad Pitt? No, Bread, and Brett, maybe, Brett? No. And then he gave me his business card, the two-handed give to the business card. I check out his business card, and yeah, his name is Bread, Bread, like the food that you eat. And I didn't know whether to tell this guy, hey, that's not really a name, that's a food. He had business cards all made. I think he worked for Samsung. He had a Korean side and an English side. The Korean side had his Korean name, totally different. For the English side, he used the English name, Bread. So I was cracking up, and I had a big smile right away. I was like, man, this guy's pretty great. His English was really pretty low, so I don't know how he came about that name, but I didn't want to break his hopes and dreams and ruin his freshly made business cards. So anyway, we managed to strike up conversation for about the remaining 40 minutes of that subway ride, which was a little bit hard to do with his English level, but I was so excited just to be talking to someone. And so he asked, oh, like, where do you live? Where are you getting off? And I said, oh, Suwon Station. And, oh, me too. And he was very excited. I'm like, wow. And then he asked, oh, like, what part of Suwon do you live in? I told him Tapdong, and he kind of knew it, but he didn't really know. He's like, oh, well, what bus do you take once you're at the station? And I was like, oh, I walk. And I told him it's like a 45-minute walk. And he, what? Why are you walking? Take the bus. It's a free transfer. And I just said, I don't know how, I'm kind of scared. He said, oh, I'll help you. And I was like, really? All right, yeah, cool. So we get off, and he's just asking people, hey, do you know, I said I live in Tapdong, what bus do you take to go to Tapdong? And I think he asked like 3 people. Finally, someone told him the 720-2. So we get 720-2, finds it on the correct side. Suwon Station was a really crazy, one of the biggest subway stations, really, really busy. Buses are so insane there. And we get on. He gets on with me. I have no idea where he lives, but I'm sure it's not his bus. There's 50 buses that pick up there. And we get on. He's like, oh, okay, what stop? What's your bus stop? And I was like, I have no idea what the name of my bus stop is. He's like, oh, you don't know your bus stop name? I'm like, no. And he's like, oh, when we're there, do you think you recognize the area? And I was like, if it's right in front of my house, I might. But if it's 2 blocks away, I don't know. So he's like, man, what are we gonna do? It's probably what he's thinking in his head. He had a nervous look about him. That's how I interpreted it. And he just starts. He's like, all right, so what's the name of your school you work for? And I said, Sejong Hagwon, Sejong. And so he just starts asking people on the bus, do you know Sejong Hagwon? Now, if you're in a really busy area, there's tons of Hagwons. That probably wouldn't have worked. But in our area, there's only 2 Hagwons. So Hagwon's a private school, by the way. So luckily, someone kind of gave him. What stop I get off to get there. It ended up not being the closest stop. So we had to, once we even got off the stop, I didn't know how to get to my apartment. As crazy as that is. So the only way I would know how to get to my apartment is get to my school, and I knew how to walk home from my school there. It turns out the bus stop was 2-minute walk from my apartment, whereas the school was a 20-minute walk. So we went way all the way, and he had to ask people how to get to Sejong Hagwon out in the street. And we get there. I'm like, all right, yeah, this is it. I can get home from here. Man, thank you, Bread, so much. Bread, you're my savior. And he still wasn't done yet. He's like, no, I want to buy you a drink. So we went to the convenience store, and he bought me a can of beer, not any for himself, and gave it to me. And then he was on his way. And of course, I had his business card, and I thanked him so much. And at the time, I was 24 years old, and it was definitely the nicest thing anyone had ever done for me my whole life. My first week in Korea, a random stranger. He talked to me on the subway, kept me company. He got on my bus, paid money to get on the bus with me. Not only did he find my stop, but then he walked around with me for 20 minutes, maybe even longer, finding my school, and bought me a drink. The guy was pretty amazing, and that was my first friend, or chingu, is how you say friend in Korean. That was my first chingu in Korea, bread.